Hello, welcome. My name is Jo, and today we are doing the evolution of a reader tag. I was tagged by Brian at Bookish, so thank you very much for tagging me. There are basically 4 questions that are kind of open-ended. So the first one is what you read. How has your taste in books evolved? I would say in many ways, my taste in books is exactly the same as it was when I was a kid. There are a few minor differences, but I have always read I don't want to say broadly, that makes it sound like virtuous in some way, but I just have always been interested in multiple genres. I've never been someone who focused in on only a single genre. When I was a kid, I read tons of classics. I loved mysteries, fantasy for sure. Things that I read when I was a kid that I don't read so much anymore are historical. I read a lot of historical fiction when I was a kid, and I read that a lot less now. But then as I got older, teen years, early 20s, I still read a lot of classics. I started to read more thrillers. I read a lot of thrillers in my late teens, early 20s. That was kind of when I got into Gillian Flynn, started to read Tana French then, I think. The Girl on the Train, that era. Also, if you hear clicking, it's because I'm hanging out by my space heater because it's cold. So yeah, I think in my early 20s, I went through a, pretentious white boy phase with my Salinger and F. Scott Fitzgerald and all of those. They aren't generally of great interest to me anymore, although I am very interested in rereading something just to see how I feel about it now. But then I went through a period of really not reading at all, and I think that will come up later. But ever since I got back into reading, definitely, I try to be open to reading almost anything. I don't normally discount anything on the basis of genre, although sometimes I do that with romance for sure. I definitely like sci-fi significantly more than I used to, but also I just feel like sci-fi was not really as much of a thing, and the stuff that was, the Animorphs and that sort of thing, I was not allowed to read. Another thing that has changed is that I used to read a lot of extremely religious books. I was raised fundamentalist, and that obviously showed up in my reading, and I do not anymore. I don't like there to be any religion generally in my books unless it's a, discussion of religion. I also am considering making a video actually about some of the incredibly fucked up things that I read as a fundamentalist kid. So that is, potentially in the works. So the second question is how you read. Has the format of your reading changed much? And actually, the format of my reading has not changed much at all. I definitely listen to more audiobooks now than I did when I was younger, but that's just because audiobooks are so much more accessible now. I have always loved audiobooks. I have always been someone who wanted to be listening to something at all times. We had some audiobooks on tape and CD when I was younger, and I would just listen to them over and over and over again. We also would get some from the library, but, the library didn't have a huge selection either. And I am still not big on ebooks, not because I think that they're bad or anything like that. I just am always trying to decrease my screen time, so I don't really want to add to that with ebooks. And also, I forget about ebooks all the time. If I start a book as an ebook, it's going to take me a good long time to finish it because it's not right there in front of me, reminding me to read it. Still, the primary way that I read books is physical paper books, and a very, very close second is audiobooks. Throughout my whole life, that has been true. The third question, how much do you read? Do you read more or less? When do you read? And has how often you read changed? So, I have kind of a waxing and waning relationship with reading in my life. So I would say from the time that I could read until probably high school-ish, I read obsessively, all the time. So much reading. We did have a lot of books. That is something that I was very fortunate in. And also we went to the library regularly, so that was another thing that I was very fortunate about. But it still wasn't really enough. So I want to emphasize, I had nothing else going on in my life. So I read all the time and I reread all the time. Then, high school to early 20s, I did read, but not tons. And then I went through a period of financial distress in which I was working all the time. And then I started university when I was 23, and then I was working all the time and going to school all the time. And so again, from age probably 22 to 26, I did not read hardly at all. Like, I probably read 1 or 2 books a year for that span of time. My last year of university, I started getting back into audiobooks because that was something that I could do, while I was on the bus or walking around campus or whatever. And then as soon as I got out of school, it was like, we're back, baby! And so I started reading a ton. And I think I've read, 100 or close to 100 books a year since then. It's been 4 years, roughly 4 years. And so, yeah, the thing that has changed the most, again, is that I do not reread like I used to. And that is something that makes me sad. So that has actually been something that has been great as I've been learning Spanish, that I can reread books that have been translated from English into Spanish. But I try to do that as audiobooks usually. Never mind, that's not important. You don't care. But yeah, other than that, I would say I am reading way more than I have read in my adult life previously. Still probably way less than I read in my childhood though, because I've got a job. When do I read? I listen to audiobooks, while I'm commuting or whatever. This is something also that I would like to get back into. When I was a kid, I listened to audiobooks all the time while drawing or doing other fun things. Now I tend to listen to audiobooks only as a means to an end. I don't really have quiet Zen time doing fun things in listening to audiobooks. And that's something that I would really like to get back into. So anyway, I know Brian mentioned that he did not used to read multiple books at a time. I have always read multiple books at a time. I am way too much of a mood reader to read only one book at a time. Right now, I am it's out of control. It's out of hand. And I am currently reading 16 books. That is abnormal. Normally I would say it's about 7. But that includes audiobooks, books in Spanish, that sort of thing. And the final question is, how has BookTube changed you as a reader? So I started BookTube at the very beginning of 2021, and I had my book Instagram. So I think I started my Bookstagram in the middle of 2019, maybe. Both of those things have changed my reading. I would just say that they both have exposed me to books that I probably would never have heard of without them. Certainly, obviously, from a diversity perspective, it's life-altering. That was something that even just watching BookTube would have done. So I would say there are 2 different categories of things here. I would say it has diversified my reading. It has encouraged me to be more interested in new releases, which is not something that I ever cared about as, just a regular reader. And I still don't care a lot about it, but it's interesting to see what things are coming out. Also, it's kind of a filter where I can watch the hype around books and then see if they continue to be talked about down the road. I don't think that that's always true, because there are books that I absolutely love that I never see people talk about anymore. But I think, you can't read everything. That was a bunny trail. But as far as a content creator on BookTube, how BookTube has changed me as a reader, I wouldn't say I feel pressure to read more, but I do feel encouraged to read more. Something that I am working through right now is that BookTube kind of encourages you to not be a mood reader. I would say with reading events, readathons, themed months, it lends itself to making TBRs and to read on certain topics at certain times. And I am a mood reader. 100%. I have been trying to do more TBRs, and I think that that is going to have to, you know, balance with my mood reading, because, you know, for November I did a TBR and it is not going well for me. Not that the books are not good, the books are great, but yeah, I just don't know how much of a TBR reader I can really be. So I think that that's something that BookTube maybe tried to change about me as a reader, and it did not work. So I'm trying to think about anything else. Like, am I more or less likely to DNF because of BookTube? I don't think so. I've always been a DNFer, and I think I will always be a DNFer. I would say problematic authors has changed. Like, if I was just a normal reader who did not share their reading anywhere, potentially I might be more open to reading from problematic authors as long as I was not giving them royalties. Not that I would read books that I specifically see as problematic, but I'm trying to think of an example. But like Kate Atkinson, for example. So Kate Atkinson cannot write a goddamn book without including the N-word. Like, I mean, obviously the N-word is generally almost always unnecessary. It is the most unnecessary thing I've ever seen in her books. Like, the one book that I read, it was a cat. It was a cat named the N-word, and it was truly just put in there completely randomly as a joke. I've never seen a more fucking unnecessary thing. So if I were just a normal reader, I would probably continue to get Kate Atkinson books from the library and read them, because I really do enjoy her work. But because I share my reading, I have stopped reading her books because, no, we're not going to promote that here. And then the other thing would be rereading. I don't think BookTube is conducive to rereading. Obviously, BookTube can be conducive to absolutely whatever you want, but I want to read all of these things that everybody's talking about that look so good. And I would also say something that has changed from BookTube is reading slumps. Like, I try to work my way through a reading slump now, whereas if I did not have a BookTube channel or anything, I probably would not. I probably would just do other hobbies, you know, during that time and wait until the mood strikes again. Okay, so just looking for some people to tag. We'll tag Toby's Book Corner, Chris Daily Reading, and Tabby and her books. And I'm going to tag Polyglot Progress, who does not normally make book videos, but she has mentioned before that she would like to venture into BookTube a little bit more. So if you want to, you could do this tag. If you are interested in doing this at all, and I did not mention it, you definitely do. And also, if you don't make videos yet, but you would like to talk about how your reading has evolved, definitely leave a comment, and I will see you in the next video.